Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. They provide them with life-changing opportunities, resources, and support them through food, wellness, community, and financial support systems. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us on the Medevac podcast. This is the elusive Part 4 episode. I don't think we've ever done a Part 4 before, but with Kegan Gill, former naval fighter pilot. He flew the F-18 Super Hornet. If you've not heard Parts 1, 2, and 3, go back and listen to them because they are insane.
I mean, it's a requirement.
Don't listen to today's episode without at least listening to those ones.
You gotta see the first 3 episodes to understand the true impact of this episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for being back with us today, Smurf.
Yeah. You know, being a fighter pilot, I love to talk about myself, so it's just only natural. So thank you for taking the time. But no, I think today people will really enjoy.
Yes.
Going from the journey of everything, the ejection, the recovery, getting back to flying, to finding myself dealing with residual effects of an unresolved brain injury, to going through the medical board process, then into a world of psychoses, the broken inpatient psych facility through the VA, becoming basically going from the lowest point in my life, needing help, and instead getting drugged, driven into a darker hole, and having my constitutional rights stripped from me, and all of that. Today's going to be, I think, a little more a little more optimistic, and hopefully inspire some hope.
A little more lighthearted.
Give folks with a little bit, give them some resources for their own journey.
Definitely.
It's going to be fantastic.
That last episode was, to put it frankly, like heartbreaking to know what you went through, and to know that, you were in that psych ward or do they call it psych ward?
I think it's called an inpatient psych facility.
Okay, inpatient psych facility. I know there's some negative connotations with some of the verbiage.
It was a loony bin.
Yeah. I mean, one flew over the cuckoo's nest, indeed.
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah, for sure.
You were in there for a month, and there's people who have been in there since, like you said, Vietnam. Like, these guys live there for decades at a time. Like, there's no chance to escape it once you're locked in that long. Like, there can't be. Like, can there?
It gave me the feeling that there's a lot of incentive to get people on these medications and then just kind of keep them there.
Yeah. It would be interesting to find out.
Business model.
Yeah, exactly. It would be interesting to find out, like, how much the average patient cost.
Yeah, what the incentive is,
and how much money is being made.
Oh, it's
keeping an individual in that facility.
It's got to be absurd.
$500,000 a year per individual, probably, for is the incentive, the stipend given or something.
I remember reading something about a decade ago about prisons was like $150,000-$200,000 a year per prison inmate.
Yeah, and that's, look at what the prison system has become. It's very, very similar in the same aspect that, if you get them in here and if you get them on this track, well, we've got a guaranteed return rate.
Free labor.
Yeah, we've got guaranteed return rate. We got free labor, which the military capitalizes on. One thing that Dave and I have been pushing on, obviously with Terra Arma, our military clothing company, is we talk about the prison system, because if you're unaware of this, all military uniforms, or most military uniforms, are made by prisoners.
That would explain the quality of someone.
So you've got the system designed to keep people in prison, right? And then the government goes and hires them for whatever, 75 cents an hour to produce our military uniforms. Yeah.
Sounds like the system we're in, man.
That's it makes my blood boil a little bit from that aspect.
That is absurd.
Yeah. So let's get into some more uplifting topics here.
Make me smile.
Sorry to put everybody down in that depressive dark spot there for a little bit, but let's
way to go.
It's only so I can bring you back out with a smile on your face, with a new bit of warmth in your heart, hopefully.
Yeah. So you're back home in Michigan.
Yeah. So my treatment has gone from bad to worse through the psychoses and inpatient psych facility, and I get out and it's more of the same. It's more seeing a psychiatrist, and here's your prescription of Seroquel and other things there for a little bit too. But fortunately, I started to get a little bit of wherewithal, and seeing the desperation that I was at. I mean, at this point, my marriage is falling apart. I am largely incapable of being a father to my little boy who just wants me to play with him. And I'm just broken, and I just can't engage with him emotionally. I'm so cut off. And, just thinking back to what he must have seen from his little perspective is this little kid just wanting his dad, and he'd come and tug up on my leg. And I wasn't ever violent to him, but I was just so grumpy and dark and broken. And I would, Daddy can't play right now.
Yeah.
And there were times I was short tempered, and little things that he did would have me yelling, and it was just, I was not myself. I was just a terrible frickin' drain of energy on my family. And it was no surprise that, we were so close to divorce and how that was going to work out.
How old was your son at this point while you were going through this period?
So he would have been 2 to 3 years old, I think. This is back in 2019. Mm-hmm. So he would have been just a 1-year-old up to 2 years old through a lot of this. Things started to get a little better. There was some glimpses of hope as I largely took a lot of my health into my own hands with eating really well, hunting my own meat, eating a lot of plant-based foods, getting regular exercise. I started mountain biking quite a bit. A lot of time out in nature alone. There's a whole therapeutic effect of that. Living out in northern Michigan on a little farm, raising a lot of our own food outside. We got chickens. We're planting a lot of our veggies and fruits and things that we're eating through the summer months, at least, kind of becoming as self-sufficient as possible in our own little ecosystem. And that was hugely helpful to kind of keep me holding on a little, at least keep a little spark of hope. But I was largely still very broken. And I started finding some books that I kind of stumbled my way through. And one of the most life-changing ones for me was Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, which is about the use of psychedelic medications to heal.
It's a great book.
And I could barely, from the drugs and everything, I could barely read like a freaking chapter at a time without forgetting it. But kind of stumbled my way through that on both the written, and I think I had the audiobook too. So the combination slowly absorbed, and I got some takeaways from it. And so I started looking into how can I gain access to some of these psychedelic treatments potentially. And initially I just reached out in my local community, and I found a guide that was willing to work with me with psilocybin. And I had a very positive experience with that. And it didn't cure everything, but it at least kind of, to use Michael Pollan's analogy from his book, it's sort of this fresh snowfall over all these ruts of negative emotions and experiences that you've had that gives you the opportunity to maybe take a new line down the mountain on your skis or snowboard or whatever. So I also recognized from that experience that this sort of repetition of what had happened with the mainstream conventional treatment with the medication and the Seroquel or quetiapine that they had used. I saw the pattern that, I had been bad, and then they gave me more and it got better, but then it got worse and then gave me more. And it just had snowballed.
Yeah. Cyclical.
To being in a psychoses all the time and in the mental hospital. And so I saw that pattern. I recognized, okay, that we have tested that thoroughly. I've gone through the scientific process myself. We've done it for years now, and I'm over it.
Yeah.
And so against the advice of my VA psychiatrist, against the advice of my family, largely, I started to wean myself off quetiapine. And I had a lot of pushback. Everybody I think has been kind of conditioned to be like, oh, here's the guy with mental issues going off his meds. We've seen that one a few thousand times or whatever. But I knew something inside was telling me I had to try this. I've tried all the ways I'm supposed to do it, and it's not freaking working. I'm about to lose my family. I'm a terrible influence on my kid. I'm just dark.
You're desperate at this point.
Yeah. So desperate. And
what's your experience like with psychedelics up to this point? Have you used them prior to the Navy or?
So yeah. Once when I was in high school, I was dealing with some seasonal affective disorder. And so just some like depression issues, not anything awful, but unknowing that it could be beneficial, I did some mushrooms out in the woods one night with my buddies at a campfire.
Okay.
And I came out of it the next morning, and that darkness had lifted off of me.
Yeah.
And I felt the wind on my face again. I was just happy to be alive, and my depression was gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that positive person that I came out of that little experience lasted. And, I became a freaking fighter pilot.
Yeah.
I went from a turning point in my life that I could have just cut myself off from the system, become an anarchist, and gone into a dark hole, which is kind of where I was at, honestly. Mm-hmm. And instead, my life unfolded and to do all these incredible things and have all these incredible opportunities. And I think that was a spark that induced that change and had long-term effects and lasting effects.
Yeah. So you had some anecdotal evidence for yourself.
And so I had that in the back of my head. And so when I read that book, it was kind of like, oh yeah, maybe there's more to this. And this isn't just a bunch of nonsense. And so the psilocybin was helpful, and that led me to the organization Vet Solutions.
Yes, yeah.
I applied. I didn't meet their prerequisites. I wasn't of the SF community. I didn't have combat deployments as required. And after learning more about Marcus and Amber Capone, it's like Schindler's List for them. They want to help everybody they can, but they only have so many resources and so many donations and funding to work with. So they have to be selective. But I still thought it was I tried anyways. I didn't get accepted to do the treatment, but they put me on an email list, which, could have been easily to just kind of dismiss me, like, crap, and get down on myself. But one night I was in another one of my sleepless nights, and my insomnia persistent still. And I got an email, and I opened it up, and there was this event going on down in Texas through Warrior Angels Foundation. It's called the 4x4x48 Challenge, which was based off of the mind of David Goggins, which is you go out every 4 hours, run 4 miles for 48 hours straight, doing it over and over again. And these guys down in Texas, 2 brothers, Andrew and Adam Marr. Andrew was a Green Beret, and then Adam was an Apache attack helicopter pilot in the Army. And they had started this Warrior Angel Foundation with the assistance of Dr. Mark Gordon and Dr. Michael Lewis to provide some help to veterans that needed access to these supplementations that could potentially help reverse some of the issues from brain injury.
So they've both got their own protocols, right? I'm familiar with Mark Gordon. He's got a website.
Millennium Health, I think, is him, and he has brain rescue products that he does.
Have you tried his protocol or is his process at all?
I've tried both, actually.
Okay.
And I'll get into that here in a sec, kind of in order. But yes, and so it sparked my interest hearing about this event, and I was largely having some benefits from the endurance sports world. I had largely been doing a lot of mountain bike racing at this point that had been helpful for me. But I was like, well, I'm gonna put together a fundraiser page. They had a fundraiser page where you could put a little bit about your experiences and whatever, and help raise funds for this event. So I was like, there was something calling me, I'm going to try to do it. So I put together a fundraiser page with sort of a brief synopsis of all the things I've been sharing with you guys over these past few episodes. And I put it out there. And at this point, I was very cut off. I wasn't really keeping in touch with many people. I was very much by myself, and my family was kind of falling apart. But I threw it out there anyways. I'm like, I didn't have any social media. So I just kind of texted it to a few friends to be like, hey, I'm doing this fundraiser for these guys, I wasn't expecting much from it, but man, the way it made people light up, and then I just rediscovered all the support that had been there all along, not only for me, but for the veteran community. And there was so much love and support. And within it was less than 2 weeks, I think it had raised over $10,000 just on my fundraiser page.
Wow.
Without any social media, just from me sending it to a few people and it just kind of going viral naturally through text messaging and email. But I was so excited, holy cow, people do care about me. I'm not alone. And, before I know it, Adam calls me up on the phone. And he's like, hey man, we saw what you're doing with the fundraiser. That's awesome. Your story is just amazing. Would you like to come down to Texas and be part of the event? And I was like, I would love to. So ended up flying down to Houston, and went out to their ranch. They've got some property out basically on the border of this Houston National Forest on this old Comanche warrior land with this great rich history in the soil there, and proceeded to be just welcomed in with open arms into this entire veteran community of people that had been through so much of the same stuff I had. It was largely, guys from sort of your world, the SF world and the rescue world, and boots on the ground, and a lot of SF, like, there's SEALs there. There's Marcus and Amber Capone were at the event. Okay. We had MARSOC Marines, we had Green Berets. So there's a lot of guys like you guys and that community, and they welcomed me in, and they all had such similar stories. They had very different ways that they had experienced their traumas in combat and in the explosions and in all of that world. Different, but similar in that we all had these injuries. We all had TBI. We all had the emotional sort of trauma of things. And then the help we got was all this pharmaceutical-based conventional medicine that had made all of us worse. And we all had similar stories of going into these psychoses, turning to drugs and alcohol, the homelessness, just all this darkness that came from that approach, and all had recognized that that's not working.
Yeah.
And it was for the first time I had hope again in my heart in so long. I was like, holy shit, I wasn't wrong about this. I wasn't crazy to wean myself off of these psych meds, which at this point I had completely, over several months, weaned myself off the quetiapine. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of naysaying from my VA psychiatrist and my family largely too. Were like, what? Yeah, I don't think you should do this. But then I got there and I saw this, and these guys had all done the same thing. And they were all like, here's a whole world of these VSOs, veteran service organizations, this community that is helping people get access to real care.
Yeah.
And I was just sparked with hope. And over, each leg of these 4-mile legs, I would run with a different member. And, we tell our stories about what had happened. And it was just story after story of just incredible people. And through one of the people at the event, Kelsey Sharon, she runs a podcast called Brass and Unity. She's a Canadian combat veteran who has some pretty wild experiences herself, but she's like, do you want to come on my podcast? And so we recorded an episode of the podcast there. Another former Marine there, Chris, he put me on his Warrior Soul podcast. And then before I had even left the place, I had done a few podcasts, and I started to become comfortable sharing my story publicly. And while we were there, not only did I get welcomed into this community, not only did we run frickin' 48 hours, there was a little bit of a medicine journey there with the Native American group. Got to do a peyote ceremony, which was pretty incredible. An opening to me at the end of the event, after we had all just run these 48 miles, as I continued and I had all this hope in my heart, I started running each of the legs faster and faster and faster to the point where I had already had 44 miles on my legs. And the last leg of that run, I was running like probably some of the fastest miles I had run since my injuries. I was just blasting through the course, and I came across the finish line just in an all-out sprint, and I felt so refreshed. Like there was zero fatigue, and it was so bizarre. There was something else, like all this energy in the place that was fueling me through that. But at the very end, we did a staking ceremony with the Native American group, and they invited us all out to stand in this big circle. And I'd never seen just so many big, tough dudes with tattoos and freaking muscles just in tears, tears of joy after the transformative experience that had been over the couple days. And he invited us, this Native American elder, to go and set some intentions, and then go up to this one tree that was out in the middle of this ancient Comanche warrior land and place our intentions with that tree. And as the people kind of cleared out, I thought about some things of what I wanted going forward and who I was. And I kind of had all this stuff rattling around, and I walked up to the tree. And as I put my forehead up against the bark of this tree, it was as if there was this electrical force that I just saw a flash of white. And there was this immediate understanding of whatever that force was. immediately understood who I was, and I understood that I was connected to something much larger than myself that was on my side. Whether that was all these ancient Comanche spirits that were in the land there and all the people that there were at this event, but it was this connection to nature and everything else around me. And it was so powerful to feel that. And there was no verbal, there was no sound. It was just immediately like it knew me and I knew it. And from that day, this is last March, over the past of this course year, I have been just embraced by all of these alternative modalities. I've started doing a number of podcasts that's evolved into more motivational speaking. I started writing a book. I've completed a rough draft that I'm now working to get published, and constantly editing and critiquing and fixing. But to go from where I was just over a year ago to where I am now is truly miraculous. And some of the steps along the way, the Warrior Angel Foundation folks got me on the Nutraceutical supplementation. I worked with Dr. Michael Lewis. He wrote the book When Brains Collide, and he was one of the first pioneers on the use of fish oil and omega-3s to help heal brain injury. So he worked with me, and he was one of the first docs that I felt like I was having a two-way conversation with, just being told everything. That's important. So that was really refreshing. They got me on the nutraceuticals. They did a blood panel and started looking at my physiology and my blood work. And I started to learn when you have TBI and all these emotional traumas, it throws off your physiology, your brain, and your hormones get out of whack. And guess what happens when your hormones are all off? Your mood gets off, your sleep gets off, your cognitive abilities, your memory, everything goes to hell. And so they started approaching it from that direction, which was completely new to me. It's like, well, the VA did a blood panel of 2 things, and they said I was fine. Well, when the VA does a panel and looks at your testosterone, they're comparing me, a mid-30-something guy with 80-plus-year-old dudes. And, their ranges are massive. And it's not about being what's ideal, what's healthy, what would be optimum for you. It's about, well, you're in the range. It didn't matter that I was pretty damn low, and that they just kind of brush it off. So
within limits.
Yeah, you were within limits.
And they are just atrociously large, those ranges.
Oh, yeah. You're like, oh, well, you're not 0, so you're alive. Cool.
And interestingly enough, is I have experience in that world as well, and getting lab work every 6 months is a requirement for me. And I ask those hard questions too. I'm like, okay, how do you optimize this? What is optimal for someone my age, and where you want to be? So I've always told my doc, I was like, I want my blood to reflect that of a 20-year-old for the rest of my life.
I want mine to be an Olympian athlete.
Yeah, at the peak Olympic level. Get rid of this other data and let's focus on getting me to Olympic style athlete.
Yeah, and Doc Lewis is like, you're sort of at this low range, and I'll use this at the risk of offending P3 pilots out there, but he's like, you've got P3 pilot testosterone right now. You're alive and you can fly, but you want freaking fighter pilot testosterone again. And
you've got drone pilot test right now.
So sorry, because there's some awesome P3 pilots. Well, P3's gone. It's all the P8 now. But anyway, that was a good wake up for me. And what's possible? All right, let's get my body to optimum, not just alive.
Yes.
And so started taking it from the nutraceuticals direction, and then I met Jesse Gould down at that Warrior Angels event, and he runs Heroic Hearts Project, former Army Ranger type himself. And saw the benefits of psychedelic medicine and started his own nonprofit to get people access to psychedelic medications. And he invited me down to Peru. So last May, I went down with a group of about 8 other vets or so, and we met up in Tarapoto. And over the next week, just had one of the most incredible experiences of my life. We're out in the freaking Amazon high jungle, waterfalls and trees and toucans and all this beautiful nature that we're surrounded by, cut off from cities and stoplights and beeps and cell phones, and you just get a chance to disconnect, which in itself was just so powerful, just to be in nature.
Very therapeutic. Yeah.
And the food was just amazing. You know, the food that's grown there in this healthy rainforest soil, I mean, is so good. Like the salads and the things that they were make were so simple, but they were so delicious and nutrient dense that you didn't even need dressing. And I remember eating just such a smaller portion of these largely plant-based foods they feed you before the ayahuasca journey. And I felt so full and content. I was like, man, if I ate that much produce back home, I wouldn't feel crap. But it's because our stuff is being grown in these depleted soils and all these micronutrients that your body is like, please give me.
Yeah, it's empty.
We're not getting a lot of those through so much of the conventional industrial agriculture that's grown in our country. But to get that even was very eye-opening. Like, holy crap, this is what produce is supposed to be like. You know, one of the chefs there, like he's going outside and he's like digging through the earth and he's digging up this, you know, this little piece of turmeric or whatever it was, and they're using those in the dishes, and this wild rainforest cilantro that he's picking off the floor of the rainforest. And so all that's going into our food. So even that was just so nourishing.
Yeah, I bet.
So they do this big flower bath, and you end up doing the vomitivo ceremony, which you pound a bunch of lemongrass water. Like it's like freaking frat party drinking competition basically with this stuff. You're just pounding glass after glass until you want to puke, and then you got to pound more of it. And before you know it, you're just projectile vomiting all this lemongrass water out of your body. And from that moment forward, like the smell of lemongrass makes me a little bit nauseous, but it helped to kind of purge the system. And in combination with the nature and that produce and the good stuff we were consuming, like my body was just so cleansed and ready to take in this powerful plant medicine of ayahuasca. And so first night of ceremony is a 3-day ceremony. And the way they kind of explain it in general is the first night sort of like your pre-op. The second night of ceremony is like your in-depth soul surgery. And then the last night sort of like your post-surgery post-soul surgery recoupment. I don't know if that's even a word, but they put you back together, recovery phase. Yeah. And so the first night, you know, everybody's sitting around, the sun's gone down, and we're all up in this malacca, which is like sort of a big open air building in a circular fashion, kind of like a big teepee. And outside, you know, you can just hear all the insects and all the animals of the jungle coming to life at night, and the stars are out, and it's just beautiful. And we all sit in a big circle in this dark room, and they pass around my pacho, which is this ceremonial tobacco. It's all, you know, it's what tobacco is supposed to be. It doesn't have a bunch of chemicals and crap, and it's just like this organically grown, potent tobacco. And so we're sitting around, and all you can see, because the lights are completely out, is everybody's smoking these mapacho hand-rolled cigarettes. And then the guides come in, and they sit down in the middle of the room and go around the room, and they hand out, you come up to take basically a shot glass of what looks like Jägermeister, but tastes way worse. It's a super bitter combination of the stuff that they've boiled down over 8 hours. It's a combination of the ayahuasca, which is the bark of this vine that grows in the jungle, combined with the chacruna bush. I think the way I remember, the chacruna kind of helps to open up the pathways so that the DMT of the ayahuasca can be received by your body.
Yeah, it's an MAOI. It allows the DMT to be absorbed into your system and act in a prolonged setting, as opposed to like when you smoke it. It gives you a short burst. The ayahuasca gives you that long journey.
That makes sense.
Keeps it from being reabsorbed too quickly or metabolized.
But so yeah, you know, this is the plant medicine that these tribes of the Amazon, the Shipibo people, have been doing since prehistory. You know, so they really know what they're up to. And these guides that you're working with have been doing this for 20 plus years, and that's their world. And so you take this stuff, it tastes awful. I immediately just wanted to vomit. Went back and sat down in the dark as the stuff took effect. And I was one of the last, I think I was the last vet in the room that night to take the medicine. And so the Shipibo, these shaman go around the room and they work with each person individually, singing these ikaras, these spiritual songs that call in this spiritual energy. And they're like a mediator between the spiritual realm and this physical realm that we're in. And they're able to communicate between the two and connect you. And so they would walk up to an individual and they would sing these songs and it would engage the medicine. And I remember sitting in the room in the dark. I had been sitting there for like an hour and I didn't really feel that much. But as soon as the Shipibo walked up in front of me and started singing, it was like it activated the medicine. And I went into a pretty intense, there was a lot of visual with patterns and colors, and the room was spinning in this, almost like it was made of a fluid. And then I had this snake that just consumed me. And I was in the belly of this massive anaconda, just feeling like I had venom coursing through my body. I was dying and I could feel nauseous. All I wanted to do was puke. And I realized in my mind, I was being digested by this snake. And as I'm sitting in there, it started to become pleasant as I just kind of accepted it. Like, okay, I'm just going to accept being digested by this. I'm not going to fight it. And from there on out through the night, it was a lot of visual stuff, but sort of on par with what I had experienced with psilocybin. So I didn't really have an out-of-body experience, but a lot of nausea was distracting me, I think, that night. And I hadn't puked up into the end of the night. One of the Shipibo came up to me and started singing. And he took this straw of this perfume and he spit it all over me. And it speckled all over my face and my body. And as it speckled, like these little red and white spirals formed on my skin. And it felt like these little peppermint patties were all over my body of liquid that expanded. And I don't know what all that was, but I immediately just purged my guts out into the bucket next to me, which apparently the Shipibo take is like, they take it as a very good thing. Your body is purging out this nasty, evil stuff.
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, nice work. And they're happy to see you purge like that. They're not disgusted that you're puking. But I went, at that point we'd been in it for 5 or 6 hours. The ceremony was closed. Once I was kind of able to, stumbled my way back in the dark and got back to my room. And I remember going back into my room and I purged again in the bathroom, and this like dark, veiny, muscular, evil spirit sort of thing. It looked like freaking one of the dudes from Jersey Shore just got puked out of my stomach into the toilet. And I remember it just kind of like, it was like this evil had just come out of me. I don't know what that was, but after it came out, I felt so relieved. And I couldn't sleep, and I just laid there and I watched the sunrise. And I was still a little bit in the medicine through the next morning. We had more of that amazing produce. We were very limited on what we could eat, but we ate a little more of that really good produce that they had of fruits and veggies. And then we did another flower bath. And then night 2 is the big night. This is the all-out soul surgery. We're back in the Malacca after sunset. Mapacho's out lit. And they call us up, and I go up there and I take the exact same amount from the exact same cup. And I didn't feel the nausea, and it started to act much, much more quickly that night.
Yeah.
And the room started spinning in this counterclockwise flow like it was a fluid. And I looked up to the roof of the Malacca, and it was just like everything was spiraling around me. And then I just kind of went with it. And initially there was some of the visual stuff and these crazy color patterns and shapes and the visual excitement of it. And then I just went to this dark place. Everything was black. And I found myself in what felt trapped in hell. And all I could hear was just screaming and moaning. It sounded like all the guys around me were being tortured. And I heard vomiting, and I could just smell shit and piss and puke. And it was just awful and miserable. And I was just curled up in the fetal position, just trapped out of my body in this fucking awful place. And there was so much darkness around me. I was just trapped in this pit of a labyrinth of hell where I realized my soul was stuck. From everything I had been through, it was like my soul had been just trapped in this darkness, somewhere dark in hell. And as the night progressed, I went into just this very it felt like I was in hell, and my thoughts started racing. And the more I tried to use logic and get out of it, the more insane I went. And the more I thought, and the more I was like, well, I can make sense of this. Oh, this isn't real. The more I did that, it just got worse and worse. And it was like just getting hit over and over again by a freaking cement mixer, just crushing me and churning me up in this dark, vivid experience I was trapped in. And that just felt like, at this point, I had completely lost track of my body. I was out of my body experience sort of thing. And I had lost track of time. And it felt like I was just trapped there for countless years in this fucking darkness. And all I wanted was to be let go. I wanted it to be over. But the more I fought it and the more I tried to make sense of it, just got worse and worse and worse until it just beat me down to where I was just so broken, I just let go.
Yeah.
And as soon as I did that, it was like my body just escaped through this labyrinth pit, and I came out and I just shot up into the heavens. And then I proceeded to have just one of the most beautiful experiences of my life as I soared through the galaxies and time and space. I lived countless lives is all of these other organisms and entities and spirits. And I lived a lifetime as an insect, and then a frog, and then other humans. I experienced entire lifetimes from different perspectives of people. I became this ancient Amazon rainforest tree, and I experienced a lifetime as this tree. And what was just a breath of air to me as this tree was, in front of me, there were all these civilizations that had built and collapsed. There were all these people that had built villages and fought one another, and they had died and moved on, and everything had just turned to dust. But for me as a tree, and my perception of time from that point of view was just one breath of air. That was just a moment of my existence. And then I experienced that same thing from the perspective of the spirit of the earth and what time was, and how that tree that I had just been was just a blip in that existence. And then of the sun, and then the universe. And I continued to step out and gaining these greater experiences. And I experienced eons of life from the beginning of time and into the future and everything in between. And I cannot articulate even a fraction of the things I saw that night and the experiences I had. It was like, whatever is me and whatever is us, that spirit or whatever is in us, whatever you believe, when you're under the influence of these medicines, it was like all the limitations of your simple human mind are gone. Yeah. And you get to experience all of the things that our five senses cannot perceive. And you get to experience everything that is around us all the time that we so easily become disconnected from with our five senses and our busy lifestyles and our ego and everything that kind of puts us in the here and now and obsessed with what's my job? What am I doing today? All that stuff you get removed from and disconnect. And it was so beautiful to just spend that night that felt like countless. There was no time, and I was disconnected from that and experienced all of it. And I wish I could articulate more of all the beautiful things that happened in that amazing journey, but it was seeing what God is, or whatever you want to call that, that interconnectedness of everything, and how we are all one, we are all the same thing, and we're all part of the same thing. And time is just sort of this made up perception we have, and our senses are so limited. And it was beautiful and exciting. And at the end of the night, I kind of started to come back into my body, and I was in this sort of elevated Malacca that almost felt like it was up in the heavens, and all the other spirits of these veterans were up there with me. And I remember we were communicating our spirits of who we were that had been around since the beginning of time. We all communicated through this language that was more like a song, almost like a frog song, or not human. But I was able to understand what it was. And we were all sharing our stories of our perceptions of that entire countless years of existence that we all were, and sharing that experience and bringing it back together. And then I came back down into my body, and I came to on the floor, and I woke up. And dude, that room was a disaster. It looked like, there was shit and vomit and all sorts of bodily fluids. And I somehow managed not to have any on me, but it was a disaster. And that room reeked.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And as I came to, the the dude who ran the retreat center, who kind of kept eye over us all the whole night, he was the last guy left in the room, and I was the last dude in there after everybody had already gone. Like, I went deep that night. And he came up and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" He helped me like get my headlamp was freaking thrown about, and everything was just a disaster. But he helped me get back downstairs. There's this winding path that leads to this open area. And in the middle of this open little patch of grass in the middle of the jungle, there's this circular little structure. And I walked out and stood on that little structure. Nobody was around. Everybody had gone to bed at this point, and the stars were out. And it was just beautiful, like no light pollution out there. So you feel like you were floating in the freaking universe, which we are, but you really get to see it and experience it. And I was standing there, and this freaking massive insect, I don't know what it was, just lands right in my hair. And I was like, "Oh, geez." Wow. I just freaked out for a second. It flew off. And my heart was up, and I was like, "What the hell was that?" And then I just imagined was that real? But then I stood there and I just looked up to the heavens, and I could just feel this freaking incredible energy shooting out of my core, of my heart, like a freaking supernova exploding. And it just transferred out into the depths of the universe. And I just felt all this energy come back into me. And again, I couldn't sleep that night. I just laid awake. I didn't feel sick at all that night. I didn't have any of the nausea. I did go back and have a massive poo, as all the medicine's going to come out of you one way or the other. The poo is a much more enjoyable way to get it out. And then the next day, kind of the same routine.
Yeah.
Did the flower bath again, more good food, and then we went in for our final night of soul surgery.
So how are you feeling after having gone through? The first night sounds pretty intense, and the second night is obviously like has unbuttoned your soul. Like you've emptied out everything.
How much further can you go?
Yeah. Are you prepared for night 3? Are you nervous?
Yeah,
Excited?
Going into night 2, especially, I was like, I don't really want to do this.
Oh,
because I was still nauseous, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got 2 nights of this. How am I going to do that?
It's terrifying sometimes.
But after the second night, I was kind of like, the nausea was gone, and I had seen the beautiful side of it, and I was much more like ready to get back into it again. And we spent the day, just all the vets there, like just, we were so close to each other. Like it had been like we'd all been, brothers our whole lives. We had just built such a close connection. We're just telling funny and dirty stories about the stuff we've all been through, and laughing and bonding so strongly. And anyways, headed into the last night, and I took slightly less, almost the exact same amount of medicine. I was just like a little tiny bit less. And I spent that night largely in my body. I didn't have like the big, crazy out of body experience, but they say on the last night, the Shipibo will often gift you with this like spiritual gift. And they came to me, and I think the gift I got was, I got to this gift of interpreting other animals' spirits. And I spent the night, this huge black jaguar spirit merged with my body. And it showed me how, as a jaguar, and you're out in the jungle and you get injured, you can't heal. You're not going to get medevaced out. You're not going to have a helicopter pick you up. And the spirit of the jaguar, through nonverbal communication, showed me how to heal. Like I had a lot of issues with my shoulder, and he was showing me how to like stretch that shoulder. And I felt like I was this jaguar, this freaking massive cat. And I could feel the power of digging my claws into the ground in these trees and stretching my arms and my legs as if I were that animal.
Wow.
And as I did that, I mean, physically, I'm sitting there basically doing yoga on my mat as this jaguar spirit. And I experienced several other animal spirits through the night, but, by 6 or 7 hours later, I was just like, it was just beautiful to have this gift of connectivity. And I saw how the Shipibo people, because they had grown up in this hostile environment of the Amazon frickin' jungle with little to nothing to protect them, they had become masters of these animal spirits and learning to work with these plants and animals to survive, and going from these sort of like hairless, wimpy creatures that we are relative to so many other animals out there, but becoming the masters of the jungles in the world in a large part through that relationship. And it was beautiful to see that. I went back and journaled a bunch, and afterwards we all kind of went our separate ways. And in the hotel back in Tarapoto that night, I just had just this incredible outpouring of creativity. I picked up my journal and started drawing again. I used to draw a lot as a kid, but I always got discouraged, like, oh, you can't really make a living as an animator and an artist. And so I stopped doing, but I picked it back up, and it was like I had been doing it for years again. And I drew this picture of myself. It was like a self-portrait. And it was like me as this, it was almost like the spirit of ayahuasca was looking through my body. Like it was an x-ray vision of myself, and you could see all the metal and rods and stuff in my body and my outer body. There was just an outline, but there was this, this wing on me. Like I was this fallen, broken angel spirit. And with all this energy shooting out of my soul and my heart. And I was like, holy shit, where did this come from? But there was something flowing through me, that creativity when I got back, and it was just going out on paper. And I didn't have to like erase or anything. It was just flew. It was coming out of me like I was, it wasn't freaking Michelangelo quality. Let's be real here. But it was incredible for me to like just have this come out of me. And I felt so alive. And that lasted, man. And it just put me on a new path of hope in life. And over the next summer, I started training for these ultra endurance events. I mean, before when I was on the medication, I was trying to work out, but I would run a mile and I felt like I just rucked with 100-pound pack. Yeah. I was, my run times were super slow. And this is it, whatever that was doing to my physiology, those meds were just crushing me.
Yeah. Destroying you.
So once I got off the meds, I felt better. And then after this experience and the Warrior Angel Foundation experience and all this thing started to come together, I started performing like at levels I hadn't seen since before my injury. On the mountain bike, I was setting all these records on Strava and stuff, and I just was freaking crushing it again. And then through Defenders of Freedom, Donna Cranston runs that organization out of Dallas, invited me down to Resiliency Brain Clinic. And I spent 2 weeks doing this intensive TBI treatment. And thoughts and prayers out to Donna right now. Her son, Matthew, former Army combat vet, is currently in the hospital with a bullet in his head. Appears to be accidental. And he's still alive though. But as we speak, I just spoke with Donna a couple of days ago. So again, thoughts and prayers or whatever you're into, good vibes. Send them towards them right now because they could use it.
Yeah, it's a rough situation.
But Donna was generous enough to invite me down, funded my flight and the whole treatment, which is probably $10,000 plus worth of treatment at the clinic. Again, did a very in-depth blood panel before I went down, even more in-depth than what I did with Dr. Lewis and those guys at Warrior Angel Foundation, and uncovered all this other stuff about my physiology that I didn't know. And we started addressing those things ahead of time with supplementation and diet changes to, eating the optimum foods for me. And then when I got down there, you do this whole battery of testing. And, it's basically the testing they should be doing at the VA to check you for all these things, but they're not for a number of reasons. But I mean, it was a deep dive all day. You're doing balance testing and they're physically testing. They're looking at your eyes and your eye movement and checking your responses. You're doing all these online memory tests and IQ tests. And there's this whole day of just devoted to testing to really build a picture of your brain. Because commonly through trauma and TBI, a normal person's brain, maybe this part of your brain controls your left hand or whatever the wiring is in most people. When you go through a TBI, they explain it's kind of like all the freaking cables get disconnected from the mixer, and the RCA cables are all over the floor. And as you heal, they kind of get plugged in wherever. Kind of randomly. And your brain rebuilds these connections. But they were able to remap my brain using transcranial magnetic stimulation and other techniques to kind of see, okay, here's where your brain's been damaged. And they're able to see, okay, it appears you had a very intense brain injury on the right side of your brain, and then put together a plan of how we're going to fix that. So got to experience transcranial magnetic stimulation. They put this, basically it's a Tesla coil put right up against your skull, and it shoots these electromagnetic pulses into your brain at a certain frequency. They do it on the right and left hemispheres of, I believe, the frontal cortex of your brain. And after 7 minutes on that machine, it feels like you had just, had a few drinks or whatever, like feeling really relaxed without any of the impairment. You just felt like so relaxed.
A little dizzy.
Yeah, and it felt great. And over the course of the week, a lot of it was some simple things like a freaking popsicle stick with little stickers on it, and you follow it with your eyes. Your eyes are essentially an extension of your brain, and very, very low tech stuff. A lot of this was, you didn't have to have a lot of fancy equipment, although they had some of that as well. But, a lot of it was just eye movements with a freaking popsicle stick. And after just a couple minutes of doing these eye movements, it felt like I had just done freaking Murph or something. Like I was just drained physically or mentally. But they did a lot of balance work with you. A lot of they put you in front of this light panel to check your reactions. And while you're reacting to the lights lighting up and moving physically and balancing on a balance ball, you're reciting colors or categories, you name it. So over the course of those 2 weeks, you do all these testing at the beginning to see where you're at. And then after 2 weeks of all this treatment, that's something that could be at every freaking military base, by the way, very easily with minimal funding compared to what it costs to put somebody on drugs the rest of their life, pay disability. Not only that, but, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, had I done this back when I started having my struggles, there's a good chance I'd still be freaking flying Super Hornets. I mean, it was that transformative just in that 2 weeks. And I'm not saying it fixed everything and there was a lot more damage that had been done, but I retested at the end of the 2 weeks and all my scores were drastically improved. From memory, I was sleeping better, like cognitive functions all just were better. Balance was better. I was physically moving better. I looked better. My posture was better. So much of the things caused by this unresolved TBI were finally getting addressed.
Wow.
And just 2 weeks of it, and if you were to extrapolate that out from the very beginning of what happened to me and they started doing that stuff, man, what a powerful tool.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the folks at the clinic there, we've been talking about the role of the pharmaceutical industry in so many things. These modalities that they're utilizing there that are not covered by insurance, which is what makes it so cost prohibitive, which the insurance industry is even more corrupt than the pharmaceutical industry on that topic. But
episode 5.
I digress. The staff there is like, we get these modalities, they come up, they're amazingly effective, and then they get taken away from us. They get made illegal through the pharmaceuticals industry's sway at the FDA. These technologies get bought up like they're going to get used
and then shelved.
There's threats. There's people that disappear. Like there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes because these things are such a threat to that business model that is making them a lot of profit in the pharmaceutical world and the insurance industry. And that whole system is built off of the system we have now and remaining that way. So when these
customers,
things
not patients.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, I continue to get these glimpses of real modalities that help and all the stuff that's really out there that people in the know about. And unfortunately, we can't just get that through the VA yet, but hopefully someday it'll head that way. Came out of that in Dallas, went back home, continued my training, and I was training at this point for the most difficult, brutal, grinding single day mountain bike race on the planet, supposedly. And that's up in Marquette, Michigan.
Okay.
It's called the Margie Gessick 100. It's actually more like 115 miles with 12,500 feet of elevation gain over largely terrain that people struggle to walk and climb. And you're trying to ride a bike on it and largely in the dark. But I trained for that all summer. I got in probably the best endurance cardiovascular shape I've ever been in, really lean down. And I mean, I could just go all day. And I showed up in September for that event with my buddy Matt and went out and I completed for a guy with a handicap license plate, by the way, who just less than a year ago, could barely run a mile in and out of psychosis, broken, hopeless. I just completed one of the most brutal things you can do on a mountain bike. And I finished, and there was a lot of very able-bodied, high-level athletes that did not finish that race. Depending on the year and the conditions you get, it's anything from a 60% to 90% dropout rate in that race.
Wow.
But freaking finished it unscathed. And
nice.
Just continue to get help from these nonprofit organizations that are filling in all the holes. This organization called Open Water invited me down, run by Danny Nichols. He's a former pro surfer, great love for the veteran community. His buddy, him and his buddy Kyle, who's actually a former Army dude with a missing leg, got blown up in a Humvee, started this organization to take out vets and first responders to do some open water paddling. And as a group, we trained in Tahoe, and then we did a paddle from Catalina Island into Huntington Beach, which is a 32, 33 mile open water paddle with some pretty brutal conditions out in the ocean. Completed that, then rolled right into this winter where started to get that call for some psychedelic healing and continued on that journey. I put up a fundraiser on GoFundMe initially, and I had created an Instagram account and started to get some followers. So I put up a little thing on my GoFundMe that, I'm trying to raise money to get some of these treatments. And I put that up, and within a day, even from the evening I had set it up, it was less than maybe 6 hours. It had raised over $1,000 from the generosity of friends and family and complete strangers that had seen it. And the next morning I woke up excited to see even how much more it had grown. And GoFundMe had shut the page down, and they had confiscated all those donations. And it was because they said it violated their terms of agreement, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I tried to fight that. They eventually refunded everybody, but I was extremely disappointed to see that happen off such a well-intended thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Found Give, Send, Go, and they actually let me put up a fundraiser, and quickly that built. And so I raised money to do what ended up, I had to take the piece that was going to be funded for psychedelics off, just because of fear that they would shut that down as well with all the stigma, despite receiving these psychedelic treatments legally
in a medical facility,
by professionals. There's still so much stigma that it's difficult to raise funds yourself for doing so.
Yeah, it is. There's still that stigma out there.
But I also, through one of the guys I met through Warrior Angel Foundation, who lives in Austin, my buddy Vance, he put me in contact with this very generous couple, Clay and Eleanor Womack, who run a hyperbaric treatment facility in Austin called ATX Hyperbarics. And they invited me down to spend a month of getting 60 plus hours of hyperbaric treatment. And so through that fundraiser, I was able to raise the money that it cost to get my family down here and get an Airbnb, and, cover some of our travel expenses to be able to get access. And then Eleanor and Clay have generously donated what's got to be over $12,000 of their treatments, consultations, supplementation, blood testing, DNA testing, they're giving it all. They're throwing everything at me that they know with their access to these incredible modalities. And then right before coming down here to Austin, someone else had seen my fundraiser page get shut down. My friend Matthew Buckley, he's a former F-18 pilot. And he has started a nonprofit called No Fallen Heroes. And he's trying to get he is getting access for a lot of the strike fighter community people, get them access the way that Vet Solutions and some of these others are getting a lot of the special operations community access to psychedelic healing.
Excellent.
But he saw that post and he's like, hey man, come on down to Costa Rica with us. We're going to go down and do an Iboga journey. Ooh. And so he paid for my trip down to Costa Rica just a few weeks back and did a week-long Iboga journey. And
now talk about leading up to that, because you've done psilocybin, you've done ayahuasca, and now you're getting ready to do arguably the most intense, most potent,
and it
one of the most
lives
potent.
up to its name and reputation for sure. But got down to Costa Rica again, very beautiful facility out in the jungle, lots of good food, good people, and proceeded to do 2 sessions of the Iboga. The first night, this is an African root. They take it from the Iboga tree, and the Breedy people use this largely for ceremony, rites of passage, and they've been using it in their culture for countless years, prehistory kind of stuff. And it's like a national treasure to them, this Iboga, because it's so important to them and their culture. And so I got the opportunity to take some of this root with a guide. And, we started the night off around a big blazing fire after sunset. They do a lot of cleansing with sage and things to ward off evil. And they walk around with this big jar, what looks like freaking wood shavings, like someone had gone in someone's wood shop and scraped all this stuff up. But it is wood shavings from a root. Yeah. And they take a big heap and tablespoon of this stuff and they dump it in your mouth, and it's just bitter. And ideally you want to chew it a little bit because it helps to activate some of the alkaloids in it to get them out into your system a little quicker. So I'm like chewing this big mouth of dry sawdust, like I got some water. So I kind of like get it all into one cheek, and I'm getting little bits in, chewing it up and trying to get it down. And after the first tablespoon of this stuff, I'm like, not feeling great.
Yeah, no more, please.
So we sit around the fire for a little bit. There's some singing and dancing, and they start that Bweedy music up, which look, if you never heard it, go freaking turn on some Bweedy music.
It's awful.
It sounds like
it is
just erratic.
It's incoherent.
Yelling. There's not like rhythm to it. It's
no rhythm, no harmony.
What the hell is going on?
That was the hardest part of the journey for me. Was listening to the music.
But somehow it started to work. Like the way it works with that medicine was surprising.
Yeah, and then like
starts to make sense.
2-3 hours go by, and you don't even realize you're shaking the little
maraca.
Yeah.
Were you guys staring into a mirror as well?
So the way we did it, we had to do an EKG prior to make sure our hearts were good.
Yeah.
And then they didn't have a machine on us while we did the ceremony.
Okay.
And we sat around the fire, did the first scoop. And at that point, most everybody, except for me and one other person, we stayed at the fire. They all were like, all right, we're good. And I wasn't feeling a whole lot yet. And for whatever reason, I was like, all right, I'll do another scoop. And so they come around and they gave me another scoop of this stuff.
Ballsy.
And I freaking chew it up, swallow it down. And actually, one of the other people there, this former Air Force woman fighter pilot, freaking awesome human. She's there doing her own healing journey. She had never done any psychedelics.
Yeah.
And she was jumping right into freaking Iboga. I think she did 4 scoops of the medicine the first night. Her first psychedelic experience was like a heroic dose of the most powerful psychedelic on the planet.
Man.
But I did too, and that was good for me. After about 45 minutes, I really started to feel wobbly. And then like you guys know, like your body just kind of disconnects from your nervous system and you're no longer able to walk on your own. One of the guides helped walk me over, and they had a bunch of beds set up for us. And the beds are in this sort of open air pavilion overlooking the jungle and the starry night.
Oh, beautiful.
So it's just beautiful outdoors. And I laid down. At this point, I'm just kind of feeling wobbly. Not really a whole lot of hallucinations starting yet, but they put the blindfold on.
Yeah.
And I laid down, and man, those auditory hallucinations on that were like something I'd never experienced.
Dude, they're insane.
So in that Iboga journey, and things are really starting to take off for me. As I'm laying there blindfolded, the auditory hallucinations were incredibly intense. I kept thinking people were walking up and whispering and talking in my ear, and we're not there at all.
It's like 3-dimensional, the auditory hallucinations. Like
insanity.
When I try to explain it to people, it actually sounds like people are walking around you. You can hear it in directional, as if they're by your bottom right or above your head or standing up. You can feel the wind across your face as if they're jumping over you. Like, it's a weird experience.
It absolutely is.
It's so off-putting.
I felt really nauseous from just having swallowed 2 massive tablespoons of freaking wood dust is all settling in my stomach, not so well. But with the mask down, now the auditory stuff's kicking off, and very quickly thereafter, I started to experience these visual hallucinations as well. And for me, what that was it looked like this army of the dead, like every warrior soul in this endless lineup was floating across this big open pool that we were looking down in from the pavilion we were sitting in. And by the way, I'm blindfolded, but this is what I can see looking down is all these armies of these ghost warriors and all these ancient warrior spirits are floating over the water in formation and floating and marching up over me. And as each of these warrior spirits floats by me, its face just floats over me, this white kind of ghostly face. And as each one goes over, I hear just go bub, 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 bub. And I just kept hearing that bub, 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 bub. And that just kept going.
Yeah.
And then from there, it was just like, they were just scoping me out. Like all these warriors were flown over me like, all right, what's up with this dude? You know, and it continues to intensify. That's going on. And the first thing I noticed, you know, there's many ways to purge. You can shiver, you can sweat, you can puke, you can shit, you can cry, you can laugh. There's all these different ways for trapped energy to get out of you. And for me, initially, I was just shivering.
Yeah.
As I was witnessing what was like all this death, all these dead spirits floating over me, or maybe not dead spirits, live spirits, I got so cold. And I kept asking him to bring me more blankets, and I had several blankets, and it didn't matter. I was just shivering, deathly cold.
Ataxia is crazy.
And I was just shivering. And then it kicked into basically like this horror gore film sketch comedy show. On the back of each of my eyelids was like a projector, and a projector would pop up on one eyelid, and then it was like a short clip from this crazy sketch comedy. And imagine like the gore effects from like The Thing and like 80s gore movies with claymation and stuff, and like the melting faces of the Indiana Jones movie, you know, and stuff like that. Just really gory, but kind of like funny and fun. And anytime anything got a little too dark and things started going down a black spiral, I used some meditation techniques that I had been practicing prior to reground myself. And I imagined my little kids, I imagined my son and my daughter, and it like brought this sense of love back to my heart and brought me back to a good place to that I could enjoy this as much as possible.
Yeah.
I was very happy to have that tool going in, because had I not, I could see how you could really bite off on some of this dark, awful crap you're seeing, hearing, and feeling, and then go into a very dark place. But with those tools, I was able to kind of keep it on the up and up.
Same for me. Was those tools were invaluable. Yeah. Just having that meditative background and just taking that breath and just bringing it back to that awareness was huge.
Yeah.
And not, I feel like, go ahead.
So were you able to interact with the medicine? A lot of people are able to talk to it, and if things are getting too intense, or they want to see a different scene or anything, like how they explained it to us was like Tinder, just swipe right, swipe left. Like if you want a new scene, just physically like think about yourself swiping, and a new scene will pop up. Yeah,
that's a lot of people. As I kind of got the hang of it, it was like that, and I was like, so you're able to play the next one. Play the next. Oh, that one's gross. I don't want to go there. All right, next one. And that went on for, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours. And I got really into it. I was just feeling so nauseous. And I remember there were many times at this point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready for this to be over. And it was like, there's probably like 20 plus hours. And it's only getting more intense.
It's laughing at you. Like, we're not done yet, buddy.
But as you know, I went into that world and I was fully in it at this point. You know, one of the guides came up. His name's Troy. He's actually, he's finishing his dissertation for his PhD in psychotherapy. And he's also extremely experienced in the world of psychedelics. Like he had been initiated by the Bwiti in Africa, or Gabon. He had gone over and like done the full initiation where he did like 10 scoops of freaking Iboga.
My God.
So went into like a week-long journey.
I can't imagine.
Week-long of that. And
I cannot imagine.
Anyways, one of the most intelligent, incredible humans ever. And he just so happened to work with me that night on the medicine, not only with his knowledge of the spiritual part and the psychedelics, but then incorporating his experience in psychotherapy into it was freaking incredible.
Oh, it's got to be huge. Yeah.
He was able, initially we started working together with some sort of fun stuff. And he's like, okay, I want you to look up into the sky. And again, I'm blindfolded, but he's like, I want you to look up into the sky. And I was able to see through the blindfold and through the roof of the building. And I could see the constellations up above us. And I saw Orion's belt. And he's like, okay, I want you to pick a star and I want you to imagine that star. So I was like, okay, I got it. And it was the center star on Orion's belt. And I shot up to that star and he's like, okay, now you're up in the stars. He's like, you're in Orion's constellation. He's like, now I want you to imagine that Orion takes an arrow out of his quiver and puts it on his bow. And as he's doing that, I become this little flaming tip arrow on the end of the arrow. And then Orion, the constellation of Orion, shoots me into the universe on the tip of this arrow. And I'm just this flaming little ginger beard dude just zipping through the universe, just screaming and yelling and smiling. And I end up plopping onto the moon. And as I land on the moon, Troy's there with me as my guide. And he's like, what do you think? And we look down and it's the freaking Earthrise coming up from below us as we're seeing the Earth come up from the perspective of the moon. So there was sort of like that fun stuff. And then as we were very in tune with each other because the guides do some of the medicine as well. Yeah. But with his knowledge and his experience, he was able to start to guide me into traumas of my past. Mm-hmm. And we went into things from the moment of my birth, I didn't even know it happened to me. Yeah. And I not only saw them, I relived them. I relived myself as a baby. I saw it, felt it, smelled it, tasted it, felt the emotions, the raw emotions I had experienced of these traumatic things I didn't have any idea even happened to me as a kid. And I guess we don't need to go into some of my childhood stuff a lot here, but it was incredibly impactful. Yeah. And as I relived these traumas that I didn't even have any memory of, I was able to see them, accept them, and I was able to forgive myself and the others involved and let it go. And we spent hours doing this. And it was like we were digging up all this trapped emotion that had just been stuck inside me for my entire lifetime, that I had just been bottling up and shoving in places and trying to forget about. But as that stuff accrues, it bubbles up and it manifests in terrible ways. And so we went through, childhood, my ejection, and we ended up, he said, by the end of the night that we had gone through over 4 times what he's normally able to go through with people because we had just clicked so well. And he was able to kind of keep me at that perfect spot. Yeah. And all throughout the night, I was very with my body. I didn't have like the big out of body experience like I did with ayahuasca, but it was so therapeutic. But by the end of the night, I was just like, holy shit. We just unloaded so much.
Absolutely.
And I had gone from all that darkness and that shivering and that sickness. I mean, at this point I had puked. I had to go to the bathroom to take a dump. Like I had laughed. I had cried. So much emotion of every different form had come out of me. And towards the end of the night, with all this warm radiating energy, I felt like there was the energy of a star was emanating from my heart. I felt so freaking hot. Like I stripped down, I nearly took off my underwear and just laid on this bed without any blankets. And I was so hot. I could feel this energy coming off of me and I was just steaming. Yeah. But as the sun came up, I was still well in it. And I spent the next day, they helped me get back to my room. And I spent most of the next day still in this place, but, nauseous and like, I don't ever want to do that again, but also like feeling a lot of gratitude and love. Mm-hmm. And we had a whole day off to just reflect. And then into the next day, I was kind of like, I don't think I need to do that again. I'm good. One and done. And I even told the guys that. And they're like, okay, well, at least come sit in ceremony and you don't have to take it if you don't want to. But as the night came on, I was like, okay, maybe I'm ready. So I did another big heaping spoon of this and got back into it. And the second night, I didn't have any of the nausea. And I spent the first hour and a half kind of just enjoying like this crazy comedy, horror sketch comedy of the hallucinations, the auditory stuff. Yeah. And kind of having fun with it now, like being able to interact with the medicine. And I did a little bit of generational trauma healing, and I saw back to, my great grandmother and some of the things that they had gone through and the traumas that I don't know how I saw them, but I did. And I later went back and verified this stuff with my dad and was like, hey, do you have a relative named Mary that lived in was she a farmer and she had a bunch of miscarriages and like all these things and all this stuff that I was able to experience, and she killed herself. And he's like, oh my God, that's my grandmother. So
shit.
all the stuff I experienced, I felt their spirits, and I did some generational trauma healing back into my history that I didn't even know of. And I was able to go back with my dad after the fact and found out these were real people. And I found out their backstory, and like
incredible.
My great grandmother had they had been on a failing farm during the Great Depression, and they had put all these, pesticides and herbicides back then. They're using like arsenic and DDT or whatever. They're using this poisonous stuff, and it was causing her to have all these crazy birth defects and miscarriages. And she finally had a viable son that was my grandfather, but he had a cleft palate, and it was caused by these chemicals they were putting on the foods. And fat salad we're still doing. They were just using different shit. But anyways, it was incredibly healing. And then I fell asleep after like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I spent the rest of the night in this very restful sleep. And I came to, and the sun was up. And I went back to my room, and they're like, yeah, that was incredibly powerful for you. Troy explained to me, he's like, that medicine was able to get deep into your subconscious and work on you ways. And he's like, for you to be able to sleep on Iboga, he's like, that's one of the most healing things that could happen. And I felt so full of love, even more magnified than I had before.
Amazing.
But, man, it was the most therapeutic sessions I've had to address trauma.
Sure.
And then rolled right from that, flew from Costa Rica to Dubai and joined up with you guys on the 7X project.
Yeah.
And then decided to jump in and run a couple marathons untrained.
Amazing.
Right after, days after doing Iboga twice. Yeah.
Just met that incredible group of human beings. And I was so grateful to be part of that whole world. And everything that unfolded on that event, the good and the bad. But it was pretty cool to be part of that and meet that community of people and meet you in person. I know we had talked over the phone prior, but then you showed up at this event. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, look at that. Small world. Met halfway
small
across
world
the
indeed.
world. I don't know how you went from Iboga directly into like doing anything else afterwards. I know there's a difference between Ibogaine and Iboga. I know there's a difference between the two, but it takes some gall to be able to hop on a plane and fly across the world and spend the next week with a group of people you don't know. After doing Ibogaine, I could barely walk for a couple of days after.
I think the Ibogaine is basically one of the alkaloids of the Iboga root, and it's kind of more concentrated.
Yeah.
So you're getting a pretty heavy hit of that one alkaloid, whereas when you have the root, you're getting a wider variety. It's about 60% Ibogaine plus 40% of these other alkaloids that are psychoactive and acting on your brain and nervous system. I don't know that the Iboga, depending on the dosage probably, but I don't know that you're getting quite the kick in the balls that you do when you just do the full up concentrated Ibogaine like you guys had the experience with.
Well, maybe we'll have to try the Iboga next time and see what happens.
I mean, probably if you do 10 scoops of the Iboga like Troy did.
I don't need that many.
You're going to have 10 days of intense psychosis and all that. But,
it's an amazing journey, man.
But I mean, thank you guys again for having me and give me the chance to talk about all this stuff and all the incredible VSOs and folks like yourself out there sharing and helping to spread this kind of healing, because there is a whole world of these modalities and help to help bring you out of whatever dark place that you found yourself in. And, maybe you're not going to have access to all of these same ones. I know I didn't have access to some of the same ones that you guys did, but if you start reaching out and learning about it, you'll find spots and apply to multiple places, apply to multiple programs. And before you know it, you'll start getting picked up and you'll start getting access to modalities that are going to help you heal. Not only that, but then just the community and the camaraderie and the connections and network that it's building for me and for veterans that are in that struggle. And, if you're not a veteran or a first responder and maybe you don't get access to some of these, there are other nonprofits that are starting to fill these gaps as well. So whatever your situation, however dark and hopeless a place you're coming from, you don't have to be this drug addicted, broken soul the rest of your life. No matter how broken you feel, how hopeless, how suicidal, you can get out of that.
Yeah. You can break free from it.
And I hope that podcasts like this and what you guys are doing is helping to spread that message. And, man, there's hope.
There is.
Despite all the, the dark things unfolding in the world these days and moments that, even still, I get my dark moments, but I think we're kind of a beacon. We're this little flame of hope that's maybe helping to reignite something. And then as we heal and we get better, we get to go back to being that person to provide service and to help others.
Yeah.
And man, that is incredibly powerful. And I think that's what's really going to cause change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Become the lighthouse. Yeah.
Fix yourself, work on yourself,
Yeah.
heal yourself. And a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, you don't need a bunch of money. You don't need a nonprofit. A lot of this stuff is just changing something simple, changing your lifestyle habits.
Yeah.
Instead of drinking soda and alcohol as much, maybe start drinking more fresh water.
Yeah.
Start, maybe go for a walk for 10 minutes a day. You don't have to go out and do an ultra marathon. You don't have to start Olympic lifting, start incorporating little steps. And if you start taking these little steps little by little, you start maybe getting some of the junk out of your food, start looking at the ingredients. And if you can't pronounce it and there's more than 6 or 7 ingredients in something, don't eat it. It's not food.
I have a 5th grade reading level, so yeah.
Perfect. That's an advantage.
Yeah. Pronouncing of these things is difficult anyways.
But there's just so much that we can do on our own to heal, and it largely takes taking it upon yourself to make the decision that you want to heal yourself.
Personal responsibility.
You can't just take a pill. There is no easy pill that's going to fix you. We can do psychedelics all day, but if you're not doing all this groundwork ahead of time and after to integrate that stuff, you're probably going to be doing more harm than good.
Yeah. It's not a magic fix at all.
No.
And big disclaimer is
it's a tool.
Yeah. Is don't go out and seek these on your own. Like don't just go buy it from a dude on the corner. Like seek out facilities that are verified and are overseen by medical staff, because there are a ton of facilities that you can go to and do this safe and legally, and with guides who can explain the process on how to enter it and how to exit and how to integrate back into your life, because it's far more dangerous to go search it on your own and just see what happens. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, it's a tool, but it's a chainsaw, and you can probably do some damage with it.
Yeah.
And on that same note, and I hope these treatments become more available and more legal and more widespread. But I also realize that we are very fortunate to gain these access to these treatments in the way that we have. And I know there's a lot of people holding their breath in desperation that want to gain access to this stuff that don't have it. And part of me is of the mindset, and I agree, if you can get this through the proper channels, it's gonna do you a lot of good.
Yeah.
But the other side of that coin is like these are plant, fungi, and animal medicines that have been around since prehistory, that have been used by indigenous people since before recorded time, and they have a huge impact. And yes, they are powerful. They can probably do a lot of harm if you're just using them inappropriately. But I understand people that are out there desperate to get some help. Do some research, learn the integration process, learn the tools, because there is a lot of free information out there. And again, I hope you can find one of these resources that can bring you in.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of people out there in desperate positions that need help now. And they don't have time to wait for this stuff to be legalized and widely available. And I feel for them too.
Yeah.
So,
we definitely do as well on this side of the table. But Kegan, thank you very much for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
It's been a roller coaster from start to finish.
Thanks again for your time, you guys.
Really, thank you.
Thanks for opening up.
Yeah.
We've got quite some time in.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you guys.
If people want to find you, where can they find you? Can they reach out to you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is just my Instagram page. I'm at Kegan Smurf Gill.
Kegan
Gill. Is spelled Kegan. Smurf, just like the Smurf, and Gill like the fish. Kegan Smurf Gill, all one word.
Perfect.
You can message me on there. I'm happy to help point you in the right direction and maybe share some of the things I think could maybe help your particular situation. Also, LinkedIn, just Kegan Gill. I'm sure you guys will probably have links and stuff of my name on this episode. So please feel free to reach out to me. You will be talking directly to me, and I will, if you're a genuine human being with a real question, I'm happy to answer. If you're a sex bot, trying to get me to look at your webcam, I probably won't respond to you, but
We'll try to filter those out.
Well, thanks, brother, again for sharing your story. It's been incredible. But be sure to share those links in our descriptions so they could find you and ask you good questions. If you guys have any comments, definitely add them. Ask us.
Yeah,
we want to hear them.
Head on over to the Medevac Podcast Instagram at Medevac Podcast or medevacpodcast.com. If you want to reach myself or Dave, leave comments, questions, or just interact with the show a little bit more. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
thank you.